My name is Adrian, and before the world called me the King of Zero, I was the boy rich people used as background decoration. I studied at the most expensive university in the city on a scholarship that barely covered tuition. Everyone around me wore watches worth more than the apartment where I lived. They arrived in imported cars, complained when the leather was the wrong shade, and treated a $10 lunch like a human rights violation. I arrived on a bus with one broken headlight and spent my evenings working wherever the university's wealthy donors needed another silent pair of hands. That was how I ended up serving drinks at a rooftop gala on the tallest hotel in the city. The ballroom glittered above the clouds. A glass ceiling revealed the stars. A string orchestra played beside a pool filled with floating candles. I moved through the crowd in a black uniform, holding a silver tray, while people my age discussed which island they wanted for winter. Then Grant noticed me. Grant was born into enough money to believe gravity was a service his family provided. He attended the same class as I did, although he rarely opened a book. He preferred opening bottles, doors, and other people's insecurities. That night he was surrounded by students who laughed half a second after he did, just to make sure they stayed useful. He lifted a glass from my tray and looked at my shoes. "Those are brave," he said. The group laughed. My shoes were cheap, polished, and splitting near the sole. I knew because I had spent the last week calculating whether glue was cheaper than replacing them. Grant tilted his drink until a line of red wine ran over the edge and splashed across my cuff. "Careful," he said. "You almost damaged something expensive." More laughter. Serena stood near the window, and unlike everyone else, she did not laugh. She had known me before the scholarship, before the uniform, and before I learned that humiliation was easier to survive when I treated it like data. Her eyes narrowed at Grant, but I gave her the smallest shake of my head. I did not need saving. I needed memory. Every insult went into a quiet room inside my mind. I never forgot one. I studied the people who delivered them, the way a chess player studies an exposed king. Grant believed he was above me because he had more money. That was useful. A man who explains the source of his arrogance has also explained how to destroy it. I lowered my head and apologized. He smiled because he thought I had submitted. That was his first mistake. At 11:58, the gala manager blamed me for a broken sculpture I had never touched. At 11:59, I was fired in front of the same people who had watched Grant spill wine on me. At midnight, I stepped into the service elevator with $12 in my account and one wet sleeve. The doors closed. A pale number appeared in the air. $100. I stared at it. 1 second later, it changed. $200. Then $300. Under the number, a clean line of text formed. Passive income active. Current rate, $100 per second. I looked for a projector. There was none. I blinked. The number remained. I covered one eye, then the other. It remained. When the elevator reached the lobby, the balance showed $2,700. My phone vibrated. A deposit had entered my account. Then another. Then another. Each one was exactly $100, arriving with the precision of a heartbeat. Most people would have screamed. Some would have prayed. I didn't either. Panic is what the mind does when it has no model. I began building one. At $100 per second, I earned $6,000 per minute, $360,000 per hour. In 24 hours, the total would be $8,640,000. Before I could finish calculating, another message appeared. Spend all system income generated during the next 24 hours. End the cycle with a balance of 0. Success will add 1 0 to the income rate. A second line followed. Only real purchases at genuine value will count. That was all. No voice, no mascot, no mysterious administrator threatening me from the shadows. Just money, a clock, and a condition. I smiled for the first time that night. The elevator doors opened onto the hotel lobby. Grant was still there with his friends, waiting for a row of supercars to be brought around. He saw me in my stained uniform and lifted 2 fingers in a lazy farewell. I walked past him without looking. My balance crossed $20,000 before I reached the street. The first thing I bought was not a mansion. It was not a car. It was a sandwich. There was a 24-hour cafe across from the hotel, and I needed to know whether the money was real. The cashier looked at my uniform, looked at the black coffee and sandwich on the counter, and waited for my card to fail. It approved. While I ate, I made more than the cafe earned in a busy hour. By the time I finished the sandwich, my balance had increased by $84,000. That was when the scale of the problem hit me. I was not trying to become rich. I was racing to stop becoming rich too slowly. At first, $8 million sounded impossible to spend in one day. Then I realized ordinary people only thought that because they bought ordinary things. I needed speed, concentration, and sellers who could complete a purchase immediately. At 12:30 in the morning, I entered a luxury watch boutique inside the hotel shopping arcade. The gates were half closed. A clerk told me they were closing. I pointed at the display. "How much for everything?" He laughed before he could stop himself. I placed my phone on the glass. The account balance was climbing fast enough for the digits to blur. His laughter died. 10 minutes later, every watch in the store belonged to me. I spent $1.2 million and left wearing the cheapest one because I liked the irony. I sent the rest to the hotel ballroom in silver cases with one instruction: place them on the tables as party favors. Grant's gala became my first delivery address. I did not need to see his face. Knowing was enough. At 1:15, I bought the boutique next door because the owner came down personally and told me I did not look like his kind of customer. I agreed with him. Then I bought the inventory, the display furniture, the crystal chandelier, and the giant gold logo above the entrance. I had the logo removed and replaced with a digital counter showing how much money I earned every minute. I did not include the source. Mystery is more valuable than explanation. At 2 in the morning, I walked into a car dealership where the night staff were preparing vehicles for an auto show. A salesman tried to direct me toward used cars. I asked for the price of the entire floor. He named a number meant to scare me away. I paid it. 21 cars became mine at once. The salesman asked which one I wanted to drive. "All of them," I said. I called Serena. She answered on the 4th ring, sounding half asleep and fully suspicious. I told her to come outside. 20 minutes later, she arrived in an old hatchback with a dent in the door. She stared at the dealership, then at me, then at the line of supercars glowing under the showroom lights. I tossed her a key. She did not catch it. The key struck her shoulder and fell into her lap. For once I had surprised her. "Adrian," she said slowly, "what did you do?" "I solved a temporary cash flow problem." She looked at the cars. "This is temporary?" The balance in my vision crossed $900,000 again. I had just spent millions, yet the number was already rebuilding itself. "That," I said, "is the problem." I told her only what she needed to know. Money was appearing. I had 24 hours to spend it. Every successful cycle multiplied the rate by 10. I left out how natural the power felt in my hands. Serena already knew I was ambitious. She did not need to know that the word had suddenly become too small. She thought I was joking until another deposit appeared. Then she asked the obvious question: "Why you?" I looked through the glass wall at the city. "Because I won't waste it." That answer frightened her more than the money. By sunrise, we had turned the dealership into a convoy. I hired every available driver in the district for the day, bought matching black suits for all of them, and sent the cars through the city in 2 perfect lines. I rode in the center vehicle while Serena drove the lead car, mostly because she refused to let a stranger touch it. People filmed us from sidewalks. News helicopters appeared before breakfast. A rumor spread that an unknown prince had arrived. Another rumor said I was the heir to a secret technology empire. I let both survive. The truth was too unbelievable to be useful. At 7 in the morning, I returned to the university. Grant was standing outside the main hall, telling the story of how I had been fired. His audience turned as the convoy entered the courtyard. One car stopped in front of him, then another, then another. By the time the 21st vehicle arrived, nobody was listening to him anymore. I stepped out wearing a new suit and the cheapest watch from the boutique. Grant stared at me. He recovered quickly. Arrogant people often do. Their confidence is not strength. It is a reflex. "Rental companies are getting desperate," he said. I nodded toward the last transport truck. Workers lowered the same gold logo I had removed from the boutique. It landed on the pavement with a metallic crash. "I bought that too," I said. "I thought you might want a souvenir from the last place that judged me by my shoes." The crowd laughed, but this time they laughed at him. Grant's expression changed for only a second. That second was enough. I had found the first crack. The next 12 hours became a blur of purchases. I bought a penthouse with a glass floor because it was available. I bought a collection of rare guitars even though I could not play. I bought every designer item inside a shopping arcade, then opened the doors and let students take whatever they could carry. I bought a helicopter, discovered I hated the noise, and bought noise-canceling headphones before we landed. The public loved it. A camera followed me into a furniture showroom where I sat on a ridiculous golden couch, checked my rising balance, and bought the building without standing up. By late afternoon, people were no longer asking whether I was rich. They were asking how rich. I gave them a number that was already outdated. But the system was not impressed by attention. It cared about one thing. 0. At 6 in the evening I had spent more than $6 million. At first that felt like victory. Then I checked the numbers and realized I was behind. Money had continued arriving while I negotiated, traveled, ate, and spoke. Every pause punished me. Every second added another $100. I had 6 hours left, and my balance was climbing past 2 million again. Worse, the remaining sellers had started slowing down. They wanted proof, meetings, explanations, time. I had none to spare. So I stopped shopping like a customer. I started shopping like an invasion. I bought an entire floor of the hotel where I had been fired. Then I bought another. The owner refused to sell the whole building, so I bought the rooftop restaurant, the ballroom fixtures, the art collection, every bottle in the wine cellar, and the rights to the fireworks display scheduled for New Year's Eve. At 9 that night, I launched the fireworks early. My name appeared over the hotel in white flame. Grant was attending another party inside. I knew because I had purchased the security camera system along with the ballroom equipment, and the live feed showed him standing at the window while the sky spelled Adrian above his head. Flashy displays are often called wasteful. That is because most people fail to understand their function. A display is not just light, it is a message that reaches everyone at once. Mine said I had returned before the stain on my old uniform was dry. At 10:30, I still had $1.4 million. I bought a small theater and every seat in it. At 11, I still had over $1 million. I bought the contents of an art gallery. At 11:30, I had $612,000, then $618,000, then $624,000. The balance would not stop breathing. Serena stood beside me in the back room of an auction house, reading the clock. A late-night charity auction was selling a gold-plated statue shaped like a roaring lion. The statue was heavy, ugly, and exactly the kind of thing wealthy people purchased when they had forgotten what beauty looked like. The bidding reached $500,000. I watched my balance. $571,400. $571,500. $571,600. I raised my paddle. The auctioneer called $575,000. Another bidder answered. Good. I did not need the statue. I needed a moving target with bid increments matching my income rate. The price rose. So did my balance. At 11:59 and 40 seconds, the statue reached $690,000. My balance was $691,200. I bid $691,200. The room went silent. The auctioneer stared at the strange number. Another second passed. My balance became $691,300. A bidder across the room lifted his paddle. For the first time that day, my pulse accelerated. He bid $700,000. The clock showed 11:59 and 48 seconds. I could not simply overpay. The system recognized genuine value, and the room itself had established the value through competition. I needed the final accepted price to equal the balance at the instant of payment. I raised my paddle again. The auctioneer called $710,000. My balance showed $710,400. 4 seconds of difference. The other bidder hesitated. I looked at him, then at the statue, then smiled as though I knew something he did not. He took the bait and bid $720,000. People are easier to control when they believe they are resisting you. The clock showed 11:59 and 58 seconds. My balance reached $720,000. I raised my paddle. $720,100, I said. The auctioneer blinked. The other bidder laughed and lowered his hand. To him, I looked desperate. To me, the final second was a blade falling through the air. The auctioneer lifted the hammer. My balance became $720,100. The hammer struck. Payment cleared. Midnight arrived. The number in my vision became 0. For one perfect instant, the richest feeling I had ever experienced was having nothing. Then the interface changed. Challenge complete. New rate, $1,000 per second. 1 second later, my balance became $1,000, then $2,000, then $3,000. Serena saw my expression and stepped back. "What happened?" she asked. I looked at the ridiculous golden lion I had just purchased, at the auction guests whispering about me, at the clock beginning a new 24-hour cycle. I had earned $8,640,000 in one day. Now I would earn $86,400,000 in the next. I rested one hand on the lion's head. "Tomorrow," I said, "I'm going back to class." By 8 the next morning, I had made $28,800,000 while sleeping. I learned that fact when Serena threw a pillow at me. We had spent the night in the penthouse I bought during the first challenge. It had 6 bedrooms, a private elevator, a heated balcony, and a bathtub positioned beside a window so high above the city that clouds sometimes passed beneath it. I had chosen the smallest bedroom because the others felt inefficient. Serena had chosen the couch because she did not trust the building, the money, or me. "Your phone has been vibrating for 8 hours, she said. I checked the balance. $28,804,000, then $28,805,000, then $28,806,000. I had slept for 6 hours and awakened with enough money to buy the hotel where I had been fired, so I did. At 8:15 I called the owner and offered the full appraised value. He refused because he thought I was joking. At 8:17 I sent him a live image of the funds. At 8:20 he asked for more. At 8:21 I told him the offer would disappear in 60 seconds. At 8:22 the hotel belonged to me. I had not even brushed my teeth. That purchase taught me something important. Money did not merely buy objects. At sufficient speed, it bought the ability to control other people's sense of time. The owner had spent decades building his position. I gave him 1 minute to surrender it. He did, because the amount in front of him was larger than the life behind him. I renamed nothing. Changing signs took time, and I had a lecture at 9. Serena followed me into the private elevator while reading a list of assets she had found for sale. She had resisted helping for almost 6 hours. Then she realized that if she left me alone, I might buy a volcano simply because it looked expensive. She was correct. The university courtyard was crowded when we arrived. News of the convoy had spread overnight, and several of the cars were still parked around the main hall like metal predators. Students held up phones as I crossed the pavement. Grant leaned against a silver coupe I had bought the night before. He was posing for pictures. I walked toward him. He smiled as if the car were his. "Your rental is attracting attention," he said. I held out my hand. He looked at it. "Keys." His smile tightened. I was just appreciating the craftsmanship. Then appreciate it from outside. The crowd made the soft sound people make when they smell blood but want to remain polite. Grant tossed me the key. He expected me to catch it. I let it strike the ground. Then I looked at the nearest student filming us. "Do you have a driver's license?" The student nodded. I pointed at the car. "It's yours until sunset." The courtyard exploded. Grant's face remained still, but the vein near his temple did not. That was his second mistake. He believed status came from possessing rare things. I understood that status came from deciding who else could possess them. I entered class 7 minutes late. The professor stopped speaking. Every eye followed me to the seat beside Serena. Grant took the row behind us and spent the first 10 minutes whispering loudly about fraud, stolen money, and fake bank applications. He wanted the room to doubt me. So I gave the room something larger to discuss. The lecture concerned market power. The professor asked what allowed a company to dominate a sector. Several students mentioned patents, supply chains, and brand loyalty. I raised my hand. "Speed," I said. The professor asked me to explain. I opened the live auction page for the city's annual International Auto Exhibition. The exhibition was scheduled to begin that afternoon. More than 100 luxury and experimental vehicles were listed, including a carbon fiber hypercar Grant had spent months telling everyone he planned to buy. I purchased every vehicle available for immediate sale. The total was just over $62 million. Gasps moved through the room as confirmation screens filled my tablet. I turned to Grant. "Was that the blue one you wanted?" He did not answer. I looked back at the professor. That is speed. The lecture ended early. At noon, the exhibition opened to find nearly every major vehicle wearing a small black card that said "Sold to Adrian." I did not leave them behind ropes. I arranged them in a spiral across the convention floor and invited the public inside for free. Children sat in million-dollar concept cars. Delivery workers took pictures on motorcycles built for royalty. A grandmother drove the blue hypercar in a slow circle while Grant watched from behind a barrier. I stood on the roof of an armored limousine and addressed the cameras. "Luxury is only impressive when somebody says you cannot have it," I said. Today, nobody gets to say that. It sounded generous. It was also a direct attack on Grant's entire identity. By 1 in the afternoon, my name was the most searched word in the city. By 2, it was trending across the country. By 3, strangers had formed online groups dedicated to guessing where my money came from. Hidden prince, artificial intelligence, buried treasure, time traveler, criminal mastermind. Only one person guessed that the deposits were constant. I met Julian beside the blue hypercar. He wore a plain gray coat in a hall full of designer clothing. He held a small brass coin between his fingers and rolled it over his knuckles without ever looking down. His hair was untidy, but his shoes were perfectly clean. He did not ask for a photograph. He did not ask for money. He looked at me the way I looked at a difficult equation. "You paid for the gold lion at exactly midnight," he said. I smiled for the cameras. "Did you come to discuss art?" "No, it is terrible art." I liked him immediately. That did not mean I trusted him. Julian turned the coin once more. "You spent $8,640,000 yesterday." The exact number did not appear in any public report. The auction was known. The cars were known. The watch collection was known. But several purchases had been private. I kept smiling. Did I? Approximately. The timing is more interesting than the amount. You began at midnight, you stopped at midnight. Your final bid increased by $100 at the exact second the hammer fell. He finally looked at the coin and closed his fist around it. Today, you are spending 10 times faster. Serena was standing several feet away. I could feel her attention sharpen. I stepped closer to Julian so the cameras would see 2 wealthy young men having a friendly conversation. "You have mistaken confidence for a pattern," I said. "No. I have mistaken nothing yet. That is why I am here." He walked away before I could dismiss him. Grant watched him leave, then looked at me with new interest. At that moment, I understood the shape of the next problem. Grant wanted to prove I was poor. Julian wanted to prove I was impossible. The first could be humiliated. The second had to be managed. I spent the afternoon creating noise. I bought a movie theater chain and announced that every ticket would cost $1 for a month. I bought 3 rooftop restaurants and ordered them to serve anyone who arrived in work clothes before anyone wearing a suit. I bought a fleet of helicopters and used them to lift the golden lion from the auction house to the roof of my new hotel. The lion was ugly on the ground. Hanging beneath 3 helicopters over rush hour traffic, it became magnificent. Every camera in the city pointed upward. That gave me 7 minutes without anyone watching the road. During those 7 minutes, Serena and I entered an abandoned underground train platform beneath the financial district. I had purchased the station from a transit redevelopment company for $12 million. The purchase was not flashy. That was precisely why I wanted it. The platform connected to service tunnels beneath 5 major buildings. It gave me a private route through the center of the city, hidden from cameras and traffic. Money could buy attention, but it could also buy absence. Serena studied the old tracks. "You bought this because of Julian." "I bought it because I dislike being predictable." He knew the exact total. So did anyone with a calculator. He knew you started at midnight. So did Grant. She folded her arms. "Grant thinks calculators are decorative." I looked toward the dark tunnel. Julian had discovered too much too quickly. A normal investigator would search for a bank, a crime, an inheritance, or a hidden investor. Julian had ignored the source and studied the rhythm. He was not asking where the money came from. He was asking what rule controlled it. That made him dangerous. It also made him useful. A clever enemy forces improvement. Grant made me look powerful. Julian could make me become powerful. By sunset, my balance was down to $14 million. That sounds manageable until you remember that another 1,000 appeared every second. Serena had prepared 3 purchases large enough to finish the cycle. A private island, a cargo aircraft, and a historic concert hall. All 3 sellers suddenly withdrew. The messages arrived within 2 minutes of each other. I read them once. Then I looked across the convention center at Grant. He was speaking to several owners and smiling. Serena checked her phone. He's telling people your money will be frozen by morning. He doesn't believe that. He doesn't have to. They only have to believe it. Grant had finally made a competent move. He could not outspend me, so he attacked the willingness of others to sell. Money requires an open hand on both sides. If every large seller closed theirs, my balance would survive midnight. The rate would remain at $1,000 per second instead of upgrading. That was still more money than I could have imagined 2 days earlier. It was also unacceptable. I did not care about wealth anymore. I cared about the next zero. At 8 in the evening, I climbed onto the convention stage and asked for the microphone. The hall quieted. Grant stood near the front, surrounded by people who believed he had cornered me. I announced that I would purchase no more private islands, aircraft, concert halls, luxury cars, or jewelry that night. Grant laughed first. The crowd followed. Then I continued. Instead, I am buying this exhibition center. The laughter stopped. The building owner was standing beside the stage. I had spoken to him that morning, long before Grant began his little blockade. He had refused my first offer because the center was profitable. At noon, I bought the land beneath its largest competitor. At 3, I purchased the parking company that served both locations. At 5, I announced a free auto exhibition that drew every visitor away from his paid event. By 7, he wanted to sell. I paid $41 million. The crowd erupted as the transaction cleared. Grant stared at the owner as if betrayal had occurred. It had not. I had simply made selling to me more attractive than standing beside him. I turned toward the line of luxury vehicles. Everything still inside at midnight will be given away. Thousands of people rushed toward the entrances. The spectacle covered the next phase. The exhibition center purchase reduced my balance, but not enough. I still needed to spend millions before midnight, and Grant would warn every major seller he knew. So I stopped buying what wealthy people considered valuable. I bought food. Every restaurant in the district received the same offer. I would purchase every prepared meal they could produce before midnight at normal menu price. No fake markups, no donations, real food, real value. Then I sent thousands of free digital meal passes across the city. Kitchens ignited like engines. Delivery bikes flooded the streets. Families ate in places they could never afford. Workers left late shifts to find tables already paid for. The faster restaurants cooked, the faster my balance fell. Grant had convinced the owners of mansions and yachts not to sell. He had forgotten that an entire city could sell dinner. By 11, I had purchased more than 400,000 meals. By 11:30, I had purchased every available hotel room for the night and opened them to anyone sleeping outside. I bought every unsold seat at every theater, every empty bowling lane, every late train ticket, and every taxi ride booked before midnight. Each purchase was genuine. Each one moved value from people who wanted money to people who needed access. The city became a festival without warning. Grant's blockade turned into my greatest advertisement. Julian appeared on a pedestrian bridge above the Central Avenue. He watched lines of delivery vehicles move below like blood through an illuminated vein. "You expected the blockade," he said when I joined him. "I expected Grant. That is not the same thing. It is when the person has only one useful emotion. Pride? Fear." Julian flipped his coin. "You are still behind." My balance showed $5,311,000. The time was 11:46. He was right. The city could sell millions of meals, rooms, and rides, but it could not do so fast enough. The remaining balance grew by $60,000 every minute. I needed one concentrated purchase, and Grant had blocked nearly all of them. Nearly. I looked at the blue hypercar parked beneath the bridge. Grant followed my gaze. He smiled. "That collection is already yours," he said. "Not the collection." At 11:50, every screen in the exhibition center changed. The car display vanished. A live video appeared from the shipyard at the eastern harbor. A long black yacht rested beneath floodlights. Its bow was shaped like a blade. Grant had spent years boasting that his family was building it for Num. It was supposed to launch on his 21st birthday. He turned toward the screen. For the first time, his confidence did not recover. The yacht had never belonged to him. It belonged to the shipyard until final delivery. That afternoon, while Grant convinced owners not to sell to me, I purchased the shipyard's full production output for the next 6 months. The yacht was the most valuable completed vessel inside. I had not used a loophole. I had bought what the shipyard genuinely produced. The final price was $5.8 million above my current balance, so I waited. Grant rushed toward me. "You can't take that." I looked at him. I already took the car. His hands curled into fists. The crowd formed a circle around us. Cameras rose. The balance climbed. $5,731,000. $5,732,000. $5,733,000. Vandana Tenjisen in 49 seconds. The number reached the purchase price. I touched the payment icon. The live screen showed the yacht's lights switching on from bow to stern. Hundreds of white lamps formed a single glowing word along the hull. Adrian. Grant stared at his name disappearing from a dream he had treated as guaranteed. The payment cleared. My balance became 0. The clock struck midnight. The system accepted the completed cycle. New rate, $10,000 per second. My balance jumped to $10,000, then $20,000, then $30,000. The yacht's horn sounded across the harbor. Grant looked at me with hatred. Julian looked at me with certainty. Serena looked at me with concern. And I looked at the rising number only I could see. In the next 24 hours, I would earn $864 million. The city had already shown me everything it was willing to sell. Now I had to teach it to sell more. $10,000 per second changed the shape of time. A red light lasted 30 seconds. That was $300,000. An elevator ride to the penthouse cost me $500,000 in fresh income. Brushing my teeth earned more than most people made in a year. For the first time, I understood that the system was not rewarding spending. It was punishing delay. At 12:15 in the morning, I had already accumulated $9 million. Serena sat at the dining table with 3 tablets, 4 property listings, and a cup of coffee she had forgotten to drink. "We used almost every immediate seller in the city," she said. "Then we expand." "To where?" I turned on the wall display. A map of the country filled the glass. Everywhere. By 1 in the morning, I had purchased a small airline's entire available fleet. By 2, I owned 2 office towers in another state, a collection of antique racing cars, and a private mountain resort I had never seen. By 3, I had bought the largest independent game studio on the coast because its owner answered the phone quickly. The game studio's employees expected mass firings. Instead, I ordered them to put a hidden golden lion into every game they had ever released. Anyone who found all the lions would receive a supercar from my collection. Downloads tripled before sunrise. Ridiculous ideas have an advantage over sensible ones. People repeat them. At 5 in the morning, my purchases had become a national entertainment program. News channels displayed a map and placed glowing markers wherever I bought something. Commentators argued about my goal. Financial experts claimed I was launching a takeover. Psychologists claimed I was having a breakdown. A former magician claimed I was 3 children inside one suit. I bought his theater and placed the golden lion in the lobby. The public laughed. Grant did not. He appeared on a morning broadcast surrounded by wealthy owners and announced that responsible businesses should refuse suspicious money. He never said my name, which meant he said it every 10 seconds. The group behind him became known as the No Sales Circle. They owned hotels, galleries, private aircraft, luxury apartments, shopping centers, and more empty mansions than the city had homeless families. One after another, they promised not to sell me anything until the source of my wealth was known. Grant looked directly into the camera. "Some people think money can purchase respect. Today, we will remind them that it cannot purchase everything." I watched from the bridge of my new yacht. Then I bought the television station broadcasting him. The screen went black for 1 second. When the picture returned, Grant was still speaking, but a small counter had appeared beneath him. It displayed how much I earned during each sentence. By the end of his interview, the counter showed $18,460,000. I kept the interview running all morning. Grant believed refusing to sell would reduce my power. In reality, he had given me a list of targets. The No Sale Circle's members had publicly attached their pride to their assets. That meant I did not need to buy the assets to defeat them. I only needed to make those assets look smaller. The first owner controlled 3 luxury shopping centers. I bought the warehouses supplying his strongest competitor, paid for every item inside, and opened the competitor's doors for free. Lines wrapped around 6 blocks. His centers emptied. The second owner had a famous rooftop restaurant. I bought the entire building beside it, placed a temporary glass dining room 2 floors higher, and served better food at no cost. His guests spent the evening staring up at mine. The third owner displayed a rare car collection in a private museum. I flew my 100 exhibition cars over the museum with heavy-lift helicopters and arranged them in the shape of a crown on the surrounding streets. I did not touch his collection. I made it irrelevant. By noon, 2 members had left the no-sale circle and called Serena privately. By 1, 5 had left. By 2, Grant was shouting at people who had stopped returning his calls. The lesson was simple. Unity based on pride survives only until pride becomes expensive. Still, breaking the circle was not enough. My balance had crossed $400 million despite constant purchases. Every hour added $36 million. At the current rate, buying a mansion felt like dropping a coin into a river. I needed heavier things, so I bought a port. The eastern cargo port stretched along 7 miles of coastline. Cranes rose over the water like metal skeletons. Thousands of containers sat in colored rows. Ships from across the ocean waited beyond the breakwater. The port company had rejected offers for years. I did not waste time begging. I purchased the logistics company that moved half its cargo, the repair yard that maintained its cranes, and the warehouses connected to its rail line. None of those purchases forced the port to sell. That was not the point. I wanted the owners to imagine a future in which every part around them belonged to me. They called before lunch. The port cost $210 million. I paid immediately. Then I purchased every cargo container scheduled to remain unclaimed for more than 90 days. By sunset, workers had stacked the containers into a temporary city beside the harbor. Drones painted them silver and gold. Food stalls opened between the towers. Musicians performed on crane platforms. At the center, the ugly golden lion stood on a rotating stage, visible from the sea. I called it the Harbor Palace. It was supposed to last one night. 10,000 people arrived in the first hour. Grant arrived in a helicopter because he needed the cameras to see that he was not afraid. He stepped onto the roof of a container tower wearing a white suit and the expression of a man entering enemy territory. I met him beside the edge. Below us, the port I had bought that afternoon had become the largest party in the country. "You're burning money," he said. "No. Burning money creates heat. I'm creating memory. You think this makes you important? I think you came here without an invitation." His jaw tightened. He leaned close enough that the cameras could no longer read his lips. "You won't finish tonight. Every serious seller is with me." I looked past him toward the helicopter. "Is that yours?" "Of course." I checked the model on my tablet. The aircraft belonged to a charter company. I bought the company while Grant was still standing beside me. Then I looked at the pilot and pointed toward an empty landing pad below. "My helicopter is blocking the view." The pilot obeyed. Grant watched his ride descend without him. I returned to the party. That was the moment his dislike became obsession. Humiliation can teach a clever person caution. Grant was not clever enough for caution. He only learned revenge. Julian found me inside the container maze after dark. He was standing alone in a room made from mirrored walls, turning his brass coin through his fingers. Reflections repeated him in every direction. "Your rate is $10,000 per second," he said. I kept walking. He matched my pace. "You earned $36 million in the first hour. Your early purchases totaled slightly less. The gap appeared again after travel. Then your port payment corrected it. You spend too much time watching me. You spend too much money not to be watched." We reached the center of the mirrored room. My reflection surrounded his. Julian continued. "Yesterday your rate was 1,000. Before that 100. Every cycle ends at midnight. The total available today is 864 million. He had it. Not the source, but the rule. I felt no fear. Fear would have been an admission that his mind exceeded mine. Instead, I studied the way he presented the information. He wanted a reaction, a blink, a pause, a glance toward the balance only I could see. So I laughed. 864 million is an oddly specific fantasy. You like specific numbers. I like useful people. Are you useful, Julian? His coin stopped moving. For what? Finding expensive things. He looked at me for several seconds. Then he smiled. That was how our game truly began. Julian did not accept employment. I had not expected him to. But within an hour, 3 offers reached Serena from owners who had previously refused to sell. One was a blue diamond, one was a mountain resort, one was an experimental communication satellite. Together, their prices totaled almost exactly what my projected balance would be at 1155. Serena thought the no-sale circle was collapsing. I knew better. Julian had arranged the offers. Each asset was real. Each price was fair. Nothing about the purchases would harm me. That was what made them traps. He wanted to see which one I chose, when I chose it, and how closely my payment matched the predicted balance. If I reacted too quickly, he confirmed the rate. If I delayed too long, I risked the cycle. Most people think a trap is dangerous because it hides the threat. The best traps hide the reward. I accepted all 3 viewings and purchased none. Instead, I began a second wave. At 8 in the evening, I bought 6 shopping centers outside the city. At 8:15, I bought every item inside them from the independent stores. At 8:30, I announced a midnight shopping race. The doors opened, music blasted through the halls, and thousands of people rushed inside under falling gold confetti. At 9, I purchased 300 city buses and wrapped them in mirrored panels. At 9:30, those buses formed a moving wall around Grant's family tower. Every panel reflected the giant words sold from the buildings I had already acquired. At 10, I bought a cargo ship carrying enough fireworks to supply a country for a year. At 10:15, I launched them from the harbor in a controlled sequence that turned the clouds gold. The balance kept falling, but never fast enough. By 11, I still had $170 million. Julian's 3 offers remained open. He had positioned them perfectly. The satellite cost $80 million. The resort cost $52 million. The diamond cost $37 million. Any combination could absorb most of the balance. Cameras waited at all 3 locations. I could almost hear him asking which bait I would choose. I chose Grant. Months earlier, Grant's family had announced plans for an artificial island resort in the bay. Construction had not started. The promotional model showed beaches, towers, private docks, and a palace shaped like a crown. Grant spoke about it constantly, as if he already ruled from the highest balcony. The land did not exist yet. That made it perfect. At 11:10, I purchased a fleet of dredging ships, floating construction platforms, marine robots, and enough steel to build a ring 1 mile wide. At 11:20, the ships entered the bay around Grant's tiny private island. At 11:30, automated platforms locked together on the water. I was not buying his island. I was buying everything around it. The live broadcast showed Grant standing on his beach, while a silver circle formed beyond the shoreline. Towers unfolded from barges, lights ignited, floating restaurants opened, music crossed the water. A bridge extended from my ring and stopped 10 feet short of his dock. His private island became the empty center of my new city. The public named it Adrian's bracelet before I could name it anything else. Grant called every news station he had not yet lost and insisted I was insane. It only improved the ratings. The construction purchases consumed most of the remaining funds. By 11:48, my balance was down to $39 million. Julian waited inside the communications satellite control room. The satellite offer had dropped to $38 million because another buyer withdrew. He believed I had no choice. I arrived at the building with 4 minutes remaining. He stood beside the payment terminal. "If you buy it now," he said, "you will have enough time to clear the rest." "You sound helpful." "I am curious. The two are rarely the same." The balance showed $39,240,000. The satellite price was $38 million. At $10,000 per second, I would accumulate another $2,400,000 before midnight. That left a manageable amount, but only if I had prepared a final purchase. Julian watched my eyes. I reached toward the terminal. Then every screen in the room switched to a live image of Ridge Plaza, the largest shopping center in the state. Grant stood in the central atrium, speaking at an emergency meeting of the no-sales circle. Behind him, store gates were closing. He believed he was protecting the final major asset in the city. He did not know Serena had spent the afternoon speaking to the shopping center's owner. The owner had watched foot traffic collapse as shoppers rushed to my free events. He had watched tenants threaten to leave. He had watched Grant turn his property into a battlefield without permission. At 11:57, he accepted my offer. The agreed price for Ridge Plaza was $41,430,000, the exact balance I would have at 11:59 and 59 seconds. Julian's expression changed. Only slightly. That was enough for me. We rode to the shopping center in one of my helicopters. The flight took 2 minutes. We landed on the roof with 40 seconds remaining. Grant was still in the atrium when every gate reopened. The lights went dark. A single spotlight found him. Then the central fountain rose behind him, projecting my face in water 30 feet high. I descended on the glass elevator as the crowd poured back inside. The balance climbed toward the target. At 11:59 and 59 seconds, I completed the purchase. 0. The clock struck 12. The system changed. New rate, $100,000 per second. My balance increased by $100,000. The fountain exploded into gold light. Thousands of balloons fell through the atrium. Grant stood beneath them, surrounded by people celebrating inside the shopping center he had tried to protect from me. Julian watched from the upper balcony. He had confirmed the multiplication pattern. I had confirmed something more useful. He could predict my numbers. He could not predict my choices. In the next 24 hours, I would earn $8,640,000,000. As the first million arrived 10 seconds after midnight, I looked across the crowd at Julian and raised one finger. Not to threaten him, to remind him that the next move was mine. $100,000 per second made the city feel miniature. A mansion was 10 seconds. A supercar was 2. The hotel that had once considered me disposable was less than 1 hour of passive income. By the time I reached the roof of Ridge Plaza, my balance had crossed $90 million. The sun had not risen. Grant was still below, shouting at people who no longer needed to listen to him. Julian stood near the fountain, probably calculating how many dollars arrived between each pulse of light. Serena joined me beside the helicopter. "We need assets worth billions," she said. "We need more than assets. What else is there? Influence. Money purchased objects once. Influence made people offer the next object before I asked. At 1 in the morning, I bought a national broadcast network. At 2, every channel carried the same image, me standing on the roof of Ridge Plaza with the city behind me. I announced that I would spend the next day purchasing businesses that served ordinary people, and for 24 hours after each purchase, the public would use their services free. It sounded noble. It was also the most efficient sales strategy I had created. Hospitals called first. Then apartment companies, then transit operators, internet providers, grocery distributors, theaters, gyms, hotels, and schools. Owners who had ignored Serena the previous day began competing for my attention. They wanted the publicity of being chosen. They wanted crowds. They wanted the price. By sunrise, I had purchased a hospital network for $900 million. The moment payment cleared, every electronic sign outside every hospital changed. Care today. Free. People stared at the words as if language itself had malfunctioned. Families who had delayed treatment arrived before breakfast. Doctors walked into packed waiting rooms expecting chaos and found extra staff, new equipment, and supply trucks already approaching because I had bought those too. A camera asked why I was doing it. I gave the city the answer it wanted. Because no one should have to choose between pain and money. The answer was true. It was not complete. By noon, millions of people associated my face with relief. Every person treated became a witness. Every family became a defender. Grant had a circle of wealthy owners. I was building a circle made of everyone else. Kindness performed in darkness helps one person. Kindness performed under 1,000 cameras can move a nation. Serena understood what I was doing. She waited until we were alone inside the armored limousine. "You're buying loyalty. I'm buying hospitals. You know what I mean. Loyalty is a side effect of competence." She looked out the window at crowds waving as we passed. "Do you actually care about them?" I considered lying. Serena would have noticed. "I care that their lives improve when I win." "That isn't the same thing." "No," I said. "It's more reliable." She did not answer. That silence stayed with me longer than Grant's insults ever had. By afternoon, I owned the hospital network, 11 apartment towers, a rail company, 2 sports teams, a chain of grocery warehouses, a film studio, and enough digital billboards to place my face above every major road in the country. I did not place my face on them. I placed Grant's. The image showed him at the morning broadcast saying money could not purchase respect. Beneath it, a counter displayed the number of free hospital visits completed since sunrise. The number passed 60,000 before sunset. Grant demanded the billboards remove him. They belonged to me. He threatened the broadcast network. It belonged to me. He tried to hold a press conference at his favorite hotel. It belonged to me too. He moved the event to a private club. I purchased the club's building while he was speaking, then sent a waiter onto the stage with a card that read "Welcome, Tenant." The clip became the most watched video of the day, but while Grant absorbed the public humiliation, Julian moved quietly. He did not appear on television. He did not challenge me at the hospital or follow the convoy. Instead, he contacted owners of the largest assets still available and asked them one question. When had Adrian first approached you? By comparing the times, he could distinguish purchases I genuinely needed from purchases I used as spectacle. He saw that Serena had contacted a floating palace called the Ocean Crown hours before the raid increased. It was an enormous vessel built as a hotel, casino, theater, and private marina in one. The price was $2,700,000,000. Julian concluded it would be my final purchase. He was correct because I wanted him to be. I had told Serena to contact the Ocean Crown before midnight where Julian's sources could see it. I had sent engineers to inspect it. I had reserved the harbor. I had even ordered fireworks for the expected launch. Every clue pointed toward the same conclusion. Grant heard the rumor by sunset. He gathered the remaining members of his no-sail circle and moved them to the harbor. They purchased every available tugboat, blocked the private docks with their yachts, and persuaded the owners of the Ocean Crown to reject me. Grant announced he would host a midnight party aboard the ship to celebrate the first thing I had failed to buy. Julian arrived at the harbor shortly after 10. He did not celebrate. He watched. That was the difference between him and Grant. Grant wanted me to lose. Julian wanted to understand how I avoided losing. At 10:15, I sent my entire visible convoy toward the harbor. Helicopters crossed the city, armored cars filled the expressway, news vans followed, thousands of spectators rushed toward the waterfront. I was not in any of them. Serena and I entered the abandoned train platform beneath the financial district. The service tunnel led to North Line, an unfinished maglev terminal abandoned after a construction collapse years earlier. Above it stood the skeleton of a tower designed to become the tallest building on the continent. The project had consumed billions before investors fled. Its steel frame rose into the night like a black ladder. No cameras waited there. That was the point. I had spent the morning purchasing the terminal, the tower, the construction robots stored beneath it, and the manufacturing plants capable of finishing it. The transactions were divided across the day and hidden beneath the public hospital event. Julian had seen the pieces. He had not seen the shape. At 10:30, I activated construction. Thousands of machines woke at once. Cranes rotated. Elevators climbed the unfinished core. Prefabricated floors arrived on magnetic rail platforms and locked into place. Drone swarms carried glass panels upward in glittering sheets. The tower began growing before our eyes. Serena stared through the terminal window. "You're finishing a skyscraper in 90 minutes. 87. That isn't better." The project was absurd, dangerous, expensive, and magnificent. It was also real. I had purchased materials, machines, power, labor, and the unfinished structure at genuine value. Every movement consumed the system balance. At the harbor, Grant's party began without me. Cameras showed him standing on the deck of the Ocean Crown beneath a banner that read, "Not everything is for sale." At 11, my convoy arrived and stopped outside the blocked docks. Grant raised a glass. Julian did not. He looked at the empty limousine. Then he understood. He turned toward the skyline. North Line ignited. The unfinished tower had been dark for years. Now bands of white light raced upward as each completed floor connected. The city turned. People pointed. News cameras swung away from the harbor. Grant's celebration vanished from every screen. At the tower's peak, construction drones assembled a circular crown wider than a stadium. The crown contained thousands of mirrored panels. When the final section locked into place, the entire ring tilted toward the harbor and reflected the Ocean Crown's own fireworks back across the sky. The ship's display became my tower's decoration. I did not need to purchase Grant's party. I made it advertise me for free. The North Line project absorbed $3,100,000,000. At 11:15, my remaining system balance was just under $2 billion. That was when Julian made his counterattack. The lights inside North Line flickered. Construction slowed. Across the city, several major sellers withdrew at once. The sports league paused its pending sale. The aircraft manufacturer stopped delivery. The art collection I had reserved disappeared from the auction. Julian had not organized Grant's blockade, but he had predicted that I would use a hidden alternative. The moment Northline appeared, he notified every seller still under review that my funds might vanish at midnight. He was testing whether urgency controlled me. For the first time, he had placed pressure on the correct point. At 11:20, I had $1,900,000,000 in 40 minutes. At 11:21, another 6 million arrived. At 11:22, another 6 million. The number was rising faster than most companies could respond. Serena scanned the remaining options. Everything over $1 billion is paused. Not everything. The Ocean Crown still won't sell. I don't want it. What do you want? I looked at the live harbor feed. Grant stood beneath his banner. Behind him, dozens of yachts belonging to the no-sail circle blocked the docks in a perfect line. I want the blockade. At 11:25, every yacht's communication system received an offer, not for the ships themselves, for the companies that manufactured, fueled, repaired, staffed, and insured the fleets. Serena stared at the acquisition list. You prepared this too? I prepared Grant. During the previous day, I had learned that his circle preferred the same exclusive suppliers. That made their luxury concentrated. Concentration creates weakness. I purchased 2 shipbuilders, a marine engine company, a fuel distributor, a navigation network, and the private security fleet protecting the harbor. None of the owners were members of Grant's circle. They were ordinary companies delighted to sell at full value. The purchases consumed $1,200,000,000. Then I issued one instruction. Move my property. The security boats changed formation. The fuel barges withdrew. Tug crews started their engines. Navigation access shifted to a new channel. One by one, the yachts blocking the harbor turned away from the Ocean Crown, not because I owned the yachts, but because everything required to keep them in position now answered to me. Grant watched his blockade dissolve around him. Julian stood on the pier, eyes narrowed. He had expected me to buy large objects. I bought the systems that made large objects useful. At 11:40, my balance was $760 million. Serena found a collection of emergency aircraft ready for immediate purchase. I bought it for $400 million and sent the planes to the hospital network. I bought a chain of data centers for $240 million. I bought every seat in the country's professional sports finals for $30 million and opened the gates. At 11:56, I had $44 million. At $100,000 per second, another $24 million would arrive before midnight. The final purchase waited above us. The crown on North Line was not merely decoration. It contained a rotating observation deck, a restaurant, a private garden, and a ring of experimental solar glass. The construction consortium had completed it as a separate project, with a final value of $68 million. At 11:59 and 59 seconds, my balance reached exactly $68 million. I purchased the crown. The system balance fell to 0. The clock struck midnight. The tower's circular peak rotated for the first time, scattering light over the entire city. New rate, $1 million per second. $1 million appeared, then another. From the harbor, Grant watched the tower erase his party from the skyline. From the pier, Julian watched the timing erase his last doubt. And beside me, Serena watched my expression. You knew he would freeze the sellers, she said. I knew he would respond to what I showed him. You used Julian to move Grant, and Grant to distract Julian. Yes. She looked down at the streets where people were celebrating beneath the new tower. Do you ever look at anyone without deciding how to use them? I almost answered immediately. Then I stopped. That pause was the only honest answer I could give. In the next 24 hours, I would earn $86,400,000,000. The first 60 million arrived while Serena was still waiting for me to speak. I stepped onto the rotating crown and looked across the country I could now reach before breakfast. The city had become too cheap. The next 0 would require the world. $1 million per second did not feel like wealth. It felt like a flood entering through a hole the size of time. At 12:01 in the morning, I had $60 million. At 12:10, $600 million. At 1 in the morning, $3,600,000,000. Even Northline, the tower I had finished in a single night, could not absorb 1 hour of income, so I turned its highest floor into a command center. The walls displayed live asset markets across every time zone. Cargo fleets moved over digital oceans. Aircraft crossed glowing maps. Factories, stadiums, resorts, mines, studios, farms, power stations, and entire city blocks appeared as purchasable points of light. Serena stood at the center of the room with a headset and a team of unnamed analysts who had learned not to ask whether my requests were reasonable. Nothing I requested was reasonable anymore. Current balance, she said, $4,300,000,000. She checked the system of screens. We can spend 6 billion before sunrise. Too slow. That sentence should not exist. Make it stop existing. We began with transportation. I purchased a global cargo airline, then a shipping fleet, then the private rail network connecting the largest inland factories. I bought aircraft manufacturers, shipyards, electric bus companies, and enough high-speed trains to form a silver line from one coast to the other. At 3 a.m, I ordered every train to begin moving at once. The live map showed white lines crossing the country like lightning. People woke to free rides, stations filled, news cameras arrived. My name appeared on departure boards in cities I had never visited. At 4, I bought 2 semiconductor plants and announced that the first year of production would go toward cheap medical equipment and public computers. At 5, I purchased a film studio and ordered every unfinished disaster movie to replace the billionaire villain with Grant. The studio completed the edits before breakfast. At 6, Grant woke to find his face on 12 movie posters beneath titles about collapsing empires. He issued threats. I bought the advertising company carrying his statement and placed a small ticket link beneath it. The movie sold out. By sunrise, I had spent $22 billion. My balance was still rising. That was when I stopped measuring money in objects. I began measuring it in systems. A city did not need one building. It needed energy, food, transport, communication, medicine, and housing. If I bought one luxury tower, I owned an address. If I bought all 6 systems, I owned the way people lived. I selected a desert region where abandoned construction projects covered miles of empty land. At 7, I bought the land, the nearby solar farms, the water plant, the freight route, the modular housing factories, and the robot construction fleet stored in a government surplus yard. By 8, machines were moving. By 9, roads appeared across the sand. By 10, mirrored towers rose around artificial lakes. By noon, the first residents entered a city that had not existed at breakfast. I called it Eclipse. Housing was free for the first year. Electricity was free forever because I had purchased more solar capacity than the city could use. Trains connected every district. Medical centers occupied the tallest buildings instead of the most expensive apartments. The public called Eclipse a miracle. Serena called it proof that I could do something good when I chose. I called it a prototype. "What are you prototyping?" she asked as we flew over the new city. I looked down at the streets filling with people. A world that does not need permission to improve. Whose permission? Anyone's. She turned away from the window. That includes the people living in it. I knew what she was asking. Was I helping the world or arranging it? The honest answer was both. A badly arranged world had once placed Grant above me because of birth and placed me below him because of shoes. I did not intend to repair that world politely. I intended to replace the arrangement. Julian understood before Serena did. He entered Eclipse alone at noon, walking through a crowd that treated my name like a celebration. He found me in the central station beneath a ceiling of moving sunlight. He flipped his brass coin once. "At 12:01, you had $60 million, he said. At 1, 3.6 billion. At midnight tonight, the total will be 86.4 billion. The station announcements echoed around us. I said nothing. Julian continued. You are not receiving money in large payments. It arrives continuously. You cannot pause it. And you are spending towards zero because zero changes the rate. You have built an elegant theory. You built a city in 5 hours. That is not evidence. It is bad taste. I smiled. Julian looked through the glass wall at families entering free apartments. Grant thinks you want revenge, he said. Serena thinks you might want to help. They are both underestimating you. And what do you think I want? Control large enough to feel like justice. For the first time, he had described me in a way I could not dismiss. I stepped closer. You say that as though control and justice are enemies. They become enemies when only one person defines both. The train arrived behind us with my symbol glowing on its side. Doors opened. Hundreds of people cheered when they saw me. Julian did not look away. He was not afraid of money. That made him rare. It also made him the only person in the city who might force me to become more than money. I know your deadline, he said. The next question is whether you can win when everyone else knows it too. He placed the brass coin on the station railing and left. I picked it up. On one side was a crown. On the other was zero. Julian had made the coin himself. It was not a threat. It was an invitation. At 2 in the afternoon, every major news channel reported that I needed to spend a specific amount by midnight. Julian never appeared on camera, but the theory spread through unnamed sources. Commentators began counting my purchases. Owners raised prices only to have the system reject anything beyond genuine value. Others withdrew because they feared being controlled. Some rushed to sell before the chance disappeared. The world became an auction with 8 hours remaining. Grant used the chaos to make his boldest move. He announced that he had discovered the source of my money. At a live press event, he held up a black phone identical to mine. He claimed it contained access to a secret digital fortune. The device showed a balance large enough to explain my spending. Transaction records filled the screen. Grant smiled as if he had torn the sun from the sky. The phone had been stolen from my coat during the hospital visit. I had allowed it. The balance was fake. The records were fake. The security was deliberately weak. I knew Grant would search for an object because objects were the only form of power he understood. I also knew he would reveal it publicly before checking whether the evidence could survive examination. Grant held the phone above his head. Adrian is not a miracle, he said. He is a thief. At that exact moment, I purchased a satellite launch company for $14 billion. The payment appeared on every financial screen in the world. Grant looked at the stolen phone. Its fake balance did not change. The crowd around him began whispering. Then the device played a recorded message in my voice. Thank you for confirming that you steal before you think. The screen displayed a live map of Eclipse. Thousands of construction drones rose from the city and formed a laughing golden face in the sky. Grant threw the phone onto the stage. It exploded into confetti. Even Julian laughed at that one. I saw the clip later. But Grant's embarrassment concealed a real attack. While the world watched the phone, unmanned demolition vehicles crossed the desert toward Eclipse. They carried cutting arms and impact drills. Their target was the central solar field. Destroy the power source, and the miracle city would go dark on its first day. Grant wanted the public to associate my rule with collapse. He believed I had focused all attention on the press event. I had focused his attention there. The moment the vehicles crossed the outer boundary, the sand beneath them moved. My construction robots had spent the previous hour digging a spiral trench. The demolition machines dropped into it one after another and continued driving in a perfect circle, trapped below ground. Above them, thousands of solar panels rotated and reflected sunlight into the clouds. The reflected light formed a giant golden lion over Eclipse. The city never lost power. I purchased the demolition machines from their embarrassed manufacturer that afternoon and used them to carve public swimming pools. Grant denied involvement. Nobody believed him. At 6 in the evening, I had spent $61 billion. $25 billion remained, with 6 hours of income still approaching. The largest available asset was Helios Crown, a private orbital energy network under construction above the equator. Its first ring of solar satellites could collect sunlight around the clock and send power to any point on Earth. The completed project was expected to be worth more than $2 trillion. Only a small portion existed. The launch division, factories, control stations, and first 12 satellites were valued at $28 billion. Grant's family controlled a major share. He refused to sell. Julian expected me to attack Helios Crown directly. Every camera watched the control center. Every owner prepared for pressure. I bought the sky around it. I purchased the satellite launch company, the largest rocket fuel producer, 2 orbital construction firms, and every available launch slot for the next year. I bought the factories that made reflective panels and the ships that carried rocket sections to the coast. Helios Crown still belonged to its owners, but nothing could reach it without passing through assets I controlled. Grant appeared on television and called the purchases meaningless. 10 minutes later, the Helios board invited Serena to discuss a future sale. I declined. That confused everyone, including Serena. You spent $30 billion surrounding the thing, she said. Why not buy it? Because they expect me to need it. You do need expensive assets. I never let a seller believe I need anything. Need raises resistance. Indifference lowers it. I instructed my new launch companies to begin building a separate orbital network called Daylight. The design was simpler, faster, and free to use. Within 1 hour, Helios Crown's owners called again. They no longer feared my purchase. They feared my competition. I offered less than before. They still refused, but now they were negotiating against themselves. That would matter later. At 9, the system balance showed $18 billion. I bought a coastal district large enough for a new city. I bought 3 entertainment companies, a chain of amusement parks, and every operational cruise ship offered that night. I ordered the ships to form a moving circle around Adrian's bracelet in the bay. Their lights created a crown visible from space. At 10:30, I still had $7 billion. Most markets were closing. Large owners had stopped answering. Julian's public prediction had turned every remaining purchase into evidence, so I gave him too much evidence. I scheduled 100 major transactions to clear at the same second. Factories, aircraft, data centers, farmland, theaters, medical suppliers, hotels, art collections, warehouses, stadiums, and power plants all changed ownership at 11:50. The financial world convulsed. Screens filled with my name. Analysts could not trace which account funded which asset. Reporters shouted over each other. Julian's timing model drowned beneath a wave of simultaneous payments. He had discovered the rhythm. I covered it with an orchestra. At 11:55, my remaining balance was $1,800,000,000. The final purchase waited at the spaceport. A completed fleet of reusable rockets stood on 12 launch pads, each painted white and gold. The fleet belonged to the launch company I had purchased earlier, but the rockets themselves were owned by an independent manufacturing group until delivery. Their combined value was $2,100,000,000. At $1 million per second, I needed 5 minutes to reach the price. Julian arrived beside the main pad with 30 seconds remaining. "You planned the exact gap," he said. "I planned several. If one transaction failed, you would lose. If I believed it could fail, I would not call it a plan." The rockets began their countdown. Grant appeared on a giant screen from the Helios control center. He had persuaded the manufacturers to stop delivery. His face filled the spaceport. "You don't own the fleet," he said, "and you won't." Serena looked at me. For 1 second, the entire operation seemed frozen. Then 12 manufacturing executives appeared behind Grant on the screen. They were not supporting him. They were leaving. Earlier that evening, Grant had threatened to exclude their company from Helios Crown if they sold to me. I knew he would use pressure. So I had announced Daylight, a competing orbital network that needed exactly the same rockets. Grant had given the manufacturers a choice between his threat and my future. They chose me. Delivery resumed. At 11:59 and 59 seconds, the balance reached $2,100,000,000. I purchased the fleet. 0. Midnight arrived. All 12 rockets launched at once. The ground shook. Fire turned night into day. The vehicles rose in a perfect circle, leaving white trails that twisted together above the coast. New rate, $10 million per second. $10 million appeared before the rockets cleared the towers. Then 20 million. Then 30. Serena watched the lights climb toward orbit. Julian watched me. Grant's screen went dark. In the next 24 hours, I would earn $864 billion. The rate had become larger than the yearly economies of many nations. I closed my hand around Julian's brass coin, crown on one side, 0 on the other. He thought the game was about discovering my rule. He had not yet understood my real advantage. The system gave me money, but I was the one teaching the world what money could do. $10 million per second made sleep impossible. Not because I was excited. Because closing my eyes for 1 minute created $600 million of work. The 12 rockets had barely reached orbit when the next cycle began. I returned to Northline before 1 in the morning and found the command center covered in numbers large enough to make experienced investors whisper. At the current rate, I would earn $36 billion every hour. A delay of 10 minutes cost $6 billion. A long lunch was now a financial disaster. Serena placed a list in front of me. "The world knows the deadline," she said. "Large owners are preparing to hold back. Then we buy before they decide they are brave. We attacked every time zone at once. I purchased the largest private food warehouses in 3 continents. I bought farmland, water systems, refrigerated ships, grain terminals, and the factories that produced basic medicine. I bought 2 global hotel groups, 4 airlines, a communications network, thousands of apartment buildings, and enough shopping centers to give me a storefront in nearly every major city. Before sunrise, I announced 0 day. For 24 hours, every business I controlled would provide its basic service free. Trains opened their gates, grocery centers filled carts, hotel rooms accepted families, clinics removed payment screens, communication networks stopped charging. Shopping centers turned their halls into distribution points. My cargo aircraft carried medicine instead of luxury goods. My film studio replaced its morning schedule with live maps showing where help was available. The world woke inside my brand. People who had never heard my voice received breakfast from my warehouses, crossed cities on my trains, used my internet, and entered my hospitals. My symbol appeared on water bottles, station walls, delivery drones, and the sides of apartment towers. I had spent hundreds of billions, but the greater purchase was dependence. Serena understood. She found me on a balcony above Northline's command floor, while dawn spread across the city. "You're making yourself impossible to remove," she said. "I'm making the services impossible to remove by tying them to you. Someone has to tie them together. Do you hear yourself?" I looked down at streets filled with buses I owned and people carrying food I had purchased. Yes. You don't just want to help the world. You want the world unable to function without you. That is how I make sure it keeps functioning. She stared at me. There are moments when a person expects you to deny the worst version of yourself. I did not. Grant had inherited power and used it to laugh at weak people. Governments, companies, and wealthy families had spent generations proving that they could waste resources while others suffered. Why should I trust them because Serena feared my certainty? "I can do more good in 1 hour than they do in a year," I said. "That doesn't make every choice yours. It makes every delay harder to defend." She left without answering. For the first time since the system appeared, victory felt slightly colder. Julian arrived at noon. He stood in the center of the command floor while maps of my growing network surrounded him. The brass coin moved across his fingers. "You have become the world's largest employer, landlord, transporter, broadcaster, food distributor, and private medical provider in less than a week," he said. "You forgot entertainment." I was trying to keep the sentence respectable. He looked at the 0 day map. "People love you today. They should. And tomorrow, they will remember. That is what concerns me." Julian had moved beyond investigating the money. He understood that exposing the system would not stop me. Even if the entire world believed money appeared from nothing, the hospitals still worked, the trains still moved, the food still arrived. Truth was no longer enough. He needed to defeat the result. At 1 in the afternoon, Julian announced a public experiment through every independent channel I did not own. He called it the silence. Beginning at 6 that evening, he asked every major asset owner on Earth to refuse all sales to me for 6 hours. No law forced them. No authority commanded them. He appealed to fear. He showed maps of my holdings and asked what would remain independent after 1 more day. Grant appeared beside him as the face of resistance. That choice told me Julian was willing to use an inferior piece if it blocked the board. Grant looked into the cameras. "Tonight, money hears the word no." I watched from Northline and smiled. Julian had finally stopped studying the game. He had entered it. By 6 in the evening, I had spent just over $680 billion. My remaining challenge balance, including the income still approaching before midnight, was $184 billion. Then the world closed its hand. Major stockholders refused. Industrial owners withdrew. Art auctions halted. Private property listings disappeared. Ships changed course rather than enter my ports. Aircraft manufacturers delayed delivery. Even sellers who wanted the money feared being seen as the first person to break the silence. For the first 10 minutes, no major purchase cleared. My balance rose by $6 billion. News channels displayed the number they estimated I still needed to spend. Crowds gathered beneath giant countdowns. Grant stood inside the Helios Crown Control Center, smiling beneath an orbital map. Julian watched Northline from an unknown location. He wanted to see whether a closed market could defeat unlimited income. I had prepared for sellers to refuse. I had not prepared to wait. At 6:15, I activated the reserve plan. Cargo ports across the world lit up. Before the silence began, Serena had arranged purchase access to physical goods already waiting for buyers: copper, steel, timber, medical supplies, construction glass, grain, machines, aircraft parts, batteries, computers, and vehicles. The owners were not selling companies or land. They were selling inventory at normal prices. Julian had persuaded billionaires to close their hands. He had not persuaded warehouses to stop being warehouses. I purchased $23 billion of materials in 4 minutes. Then $31 billion in energy output scheduled for the next year. Then $18 billion in unsold aircraft and ships. Then $12 billion in art, jewelry, and collectibles from thousands of smaller auctions that had ignored the silence. The estimated challenge balance plunged. Grant's smile vanished. Julian did not panic. He had expected a reserve plan. At 8 in the evening, the independent markets also went quiet. Julian's message spread to smaller sellers. The purchases slowed again. That was when Helios Crown began falling from the sky. The Orbital Network's central construction station, Crown 1, was the largest private object ever placed in orbit. It held thousands of workers, solar panels wider than cities, fuel tanks, robotic assembly arms, and the control systems for future satellites. Its value exceeded $150 billion. Grant's family still controlled enough of Helios Crown to influence the station. A sudden engine failure shifted Crown 1 into a decaying orbit. The public announcement called it an accident. I watched the orbital path for 3 seconds and knew it was not. The failed engines were arranged on one side. The remaining thrust pointed the station toward the ocean beside Eclipse. If the orbit continued, Crown 1 would break apart over the city I had built that morning. Grant did not merely want me to fail. He wanted my symbol buried beneath fire. Serena stared at the projected path. Can we move the city? Not fast enough. Can Helios fix it? They are claiming control failure. She looked at me. What do we do? I turned toward the launch map. We buy Gravity some competition. The 12 rockets I had purchased at the previous midnight were already in orbit. They carried construction drones for daylight. I ordered all 12 to change course. The manufacturers protested. Engineers said the docking angles were impossible. News commentators called it a suicide mission for the machines. Grant appeared on a broadcast and accused me of making the disaster worse. He spoke too quickly. Guilty people often know the result before everyone else. I sent the clip to Julian. Then I focused on the sky. The rockets approached Crown 1 from 12 directions. Their engines fired in sequence, creating a ring of blue light around the falling station. Robotic arms extended. The first missed. The second struck a solar wing and spun away. The third attached near the central frame. One by one, the others locked on. From Earth, the station looked like a dark crown surrounded by 12 burning jewels. The rockets fired together. Crown 1 stopped falling. For 11 seconds, it hung at the lowest point of its orbit, while the engines screamed against the planet. Then the line on the map began rising. Eclipse erupted in cheers. The entire world watched my property drag a city-sized station back into the sky. Grant watched too. He had tried to turn my greatest public project into a crater. Instead, he gave me the most dramatic rescue in human history. The Helios owners broke the silence first. They were terrified of losing the station, and more terrified of leaving it under Grant's influence. At 9:30, they offered Crown 1, its control network, and the completed satellite ring for $162 billion. I did not negotiate. I paid. The purchase consumed nearly all the remaining challenge balance. Every screen inside the Helios control center changed. Grant's access disappeared. My symbol replaced his family crest. Above Earth, Crown 1 rotated its solar wings and reflected a line of gold across the night side of the planet. I renamed it Daylight 1. Grant was escorted from the control room by security personnel whose company I had purchased that afternoon. Julian's silence collapsed. Owners rushed to sell before midnight, afraid that refusing me would only make their assets targets for Grant's desperation. I bought energy plants, emergency fleets, factories, and apartment districts in a final wave. At 11:40, the system balance was $68 billion. That number would have terrified me 2 days earlier. Now it was an inconvenience. The last large purchase was an orbital cargo fleet waiting beside Daylight 1. 64 reusable shuttles, 6 fuel depots, and a chain of automated repair platforms were valued at $74 billion. The owners had joined the silence. After the rescue, they asked me to buy. I waited. Julian appeared on the roof of North Line at 11:58. The city wind pulled at his gray coat. He held the brass coin but did not flip it. "You broke the silence," he said. "Grant broke it. You knew he would attack something." I knew he could not survive being ignored. You risked eclipse. No. I gave him the illusion that it was unprotected. Julian looked toward the projected image of Daylight 1 crossing the sky. At 100 million per second, tomorrow's total will be $8.64 trillion. You say tomorrow as though tonight is finished. At 11:59 and 59 seconds, the balance reached 74 billion. I completed the purchase of the orbital cargo fleet. 0. Midnight. The sky above the city filled with 64 white lights as the shuttles activated their engines around Daylight 1. New rate, $100 million per second. $100 million appeared. Then 200 million. Then 3. Julian finally flipped the coin. It landed on the roof between us. 0 faced upward. The silence was 6 hours, he said. The next one begins now and lasts all day. Every screen in the city changed. Owners, companies, artists, industrial groups, and investors across the world appeared in a single broadcast. One after another, they repeated the same sentence. We will not sell to Adrian. Grant appeared last. Behind him stood the incomplete ground facilities of Helios Crown, the surviving factories, launch sites, floating energy cities, and unfinished solar ring. Together they formed the largest privately controlled asset network on Earth. Grant placed a gold crown on his head. I am the last thing you will never own, he said. The broadcast ended. My balance had already reached $6 billion. Julian looked at me. Welcome to Black Midnight. I looked at the world map as thousands of purchasable lights disappeared. For the first time, the problem was no longer that things were too expensive. The problem was that Earth had become too afraid to have a price. Black Midnight began with silence. Not true silence. The city still breathed. Trains moved. Hospitals worked. Delivery drones crossed the sky. But the market lights inside North Line vanished one after another until the world map looked like a sky without stars. My balance did the opposite. $6,100,000,000. $6,200,000,000. $6,300,000,000. $100 million arrived every second. At that speed, I earned $6 billion per minute, 360 billion per hour. By the next midnight, the total would be $8,640 billion. Grant believed there was nothing left expensive enough to absorb it. Julian believed even infinite money required consent. They were both right. That was what made the challenge interesting. At 12:03, I made my first move. Public stock markets in several time zones were still open. The companies in Julian's coalition had asked their largest owners not to sell, but ordinary shareholders had made no promise. I purchased every available share in transportation, energy, manufacturing, communication, medicine, entertainment, and retail companies that fit my plan. The screens inside Northline flashed back to life. 10 billion vanished from the balance, then 20, then 50. My purchases moved so quickly that trading systems paused to breathe. Prices rose. I did not chase them beyond real value. I shifted to the next company, then the next, then the next. Millions of ordinary sellers accepted before the coalition could react. By 12:15, I had purchased $180 billion in stocks. Grant appeared on a broadcast from the Helios Crown Ground City. He wore the gold crown from the Black Midnight announcement and sat on a throne beneath a ring of solar mirrors. That is all? He asked. At your current speed, you replaced it in 30 minutes. He was trying to mock me. Instead, he explained the problem perfectly. I placed his quote on every screen in Northline. Then I added a line beneath it. Thank you for doing the math. At 1 in the morning, public stock markets began restricting my purchases. At 1:10, the remaining large shareholders withdrew. At 1:15, the world map dimmed again. My balance crossed $300 billion. I moved to physical inventory. Every car manufacturer outside the coalition received an immediate order for completed vehicles at normal price. I purchased millions of cars, trucks, motorcycles, buses, construction machines, and farm vehicles. I bought every available private jet, cargo plane, cruise ship, yacht, and train not already promised to another buyer. Ports lit up. Warehouses emptied. Dealerships changed their signs to sold. I had once needed an entire day to buy 21 cars. Now I bought the world's unsold vehicles in 11 minutes. The total was just over $200 billion. My balance recovered before the hour ended. At 2, I moved to real estate. Shopping centers, hotels, apartment blocks, office towers, resorts, theaters, stadiums, farms, warehouses, islands, marinas, factories, and private homes appeared in rapid succession. Many owners had joined Black Midnight, but enough had refused to let fear make their decisions. They sold. Each purchase triggered a light on the map. For 20 minutes, the dark world glittered again. Then Julian spoke. His face appeared on independent broadcasts. He did not accuse the sellers. He did not threaten them. He simply showed a map of everything I already owned and asked one question. When the person who owns your hospital also owns your home, your food, your transport, your screen, and your job, what does the word choice mean? The effect was immediate. Sales stopped. Julian understood that greed would never hold the coalition together. Fear of me might. By 3 a.m, I had spent nearly $1 trillion. I had also earned more than $1 trillion. The balance remained above 100 billion and continued climbing. The public countdown showed 7,600 billion still expected before midnight. Grant celebrated as if the day were already over. I left Northline. Serena followed me into the underground station. Where are we going? She asked. To breakfast. You are earning $6 billion per minute. I know. That is a very expensive omelet. We entered a small cafe beneath Ridge Plaza, one of the few places I had not purchased because the owner had refused every offer and made excellent coffee. The tables were empty. The owner placed 2 plates in front of us without asking what we wanted. The meal cost $24. During the first bite, I earned 18 billion. Serena watched the balance estimate on her tablet. You don't have a plan, she said. I have several, which means none of them are enough. I cut the omelet. She was correct. My reserve purchases could absorb perhaps 2 trillion more. Daylight expansion could absorb another one. Global construction, power, and transportation projects might consume 2. That still left trillions, and Julian would close each market as soon as I entered it. For the first time since the system awakened, the world itself was adapting faster than my spending. Serena leaned forward. You could stop. No. You would still earn 100 million every second. That rate is a platform, not a victory. Listen to yourself. Nobody is mocking your shoes anymore. This is not about Grant. Then what is it about? I looked around the cafe. An old television showed Grant seated beneath his crown. A second window displayed Julian's map of my empire. Outside, people crossed a shopping center I owned toward trains I owned, carrying food from warehouses I owned. I answered honestly. It is about never being placed beneath a smaller mind again. Serena's expression hardened. That is Grant's dream too. No. Grant wanted to stand above people so they would look small. I want to stand high enough to move everything. You think that difference saves you? It saves them. She pushed her plate away. You can buy the whole planet and still be the boy in the stained uniform, trying to make one room regret laughing. The words struck harder than I expected. Not because they were entirely true, because they were true enough. Serena stood to leave. I could have stopped her with one sentence. I could have apologized, lied, or promised that I would become whatever she needed to hear. Manipulating Grant was simple because he wanted praise. Manipulating Julian was difficult because he wanted truth. Manipulating Serena would have been possible because she wanted to believe I had limits. I did not do it. Stay, I said. She paused. I need someone who can tell me when victory becomes smaller than the reason I wanted it. She looked back. That was not an apology. It was more honest than one. She returned to the table. Then stop looking at the crown, she said. Look at the people who aren't wearing one. That sentence gave me the final strategy. Julian had organized the largest owners in the world. Grant had gathered the proudest. Every screen focused on trillion-dollar companies, orbital stations, energy rings, islands, and towers. They believed expensive meant rare. They were wrong. The most expensive thing on Earth was everything ordinary people already had. I finished breakfast, then I bought the cafe. The owner refused again. So I smiled, paid for the meal, and left. Some things remaining outside my control made the city more interesting. At 4 a.m, I returned to Northline and divided the command center into 2 operations. The first would continue attacking large assets. The second would prepare a market no billionaire could close. Serena took control of the second. At 5, I began the largest construction purchase in history. I ordered new hospitals, homes, water plants, rail lines, ports, schools, data centers, solar farms, food facilities, emergency shelters, and manufacturing zones across every region willing to build them. I purchased steel, concrete, glass, machines, energy, and labor from independent producers. Not future promises with imaginary prices. Real output, real materials, real work at real value. Factories that had joined Black Midnight faced a choice: remain silent or watch competitors receive the largest orders ever placed. The first broke at 5:12, then another, then hundreds. Industrial lights returned to the map. By 7, I had purchased $1.3 trillion of construction and production. New cities appeared as digital models, rail lines stretched across continents, daylight satellites were added to launch schedules. Ocean cleaning fleets began assembly. My empire was no longer buying the world as it existed. It was buying the world before it existed. Julian responded at 8. He asked manufacturers to stop taking orders from me. He warned that I would own the future before anyone else reached it. Several withdrew. Others continued because my projects paid workers, built homes, and offered free power. Black Midnight split into 2 camps: those who feared my control, and those who had spent their lives waiting for someone to build what I was building. Grant tried to reunite them with spectacle. At 9 in the morning, he launched the remaining Helios Crown satellites without my launch network. Hundreds of solar mirrors rose from hidden ocean platforms. They formed a burning ring across the morning sky. Grant stood on a floating energy city beneath them, wearing his gold crown. "Adrian buys what others create," he said. "I create what he cannot buy." The completed Helios assets, factories, launch platforms, floating cities, power network, and future orbital rights were valued at $2.4 trillion. It was the largest independent prize on Earth, and Grant refused every offer. I ignored him. At 10, I purchased a global art collection worth $100 billion and placed it in public museums. At 11, I bought another 200 shopping centers and turned their parking areas into free housing construction sites. At noon, I acquired ocean mining fleets, scientific stations, satellite networks, and enough rare metals to build daylight for a decade. Grant continued broadcasting. I did not respond. By 1 in the afternoon, he had repeated my name more than 200 times. By 2, independent channels stopped carrying his speeches because viewers were watching the cities I was building instead. By 3, the gold crown looked less like power and more like a costume. That was when I made my offer, not privately. I appeared on every screen I controlled, standing in the same stained service uniform I had worn on the night the system awakened. I had kept it in a glass case inside the hotel. The wine mark was still visible on the cuff. Behind me stood the ugly golden lion. "I will not purchase Helios Crown," I said. "Grant may keep it. A crown is valuable only when somebody else wants to wear it." Then I announced the crown price. At sunset, I would hold one live auction for the most valuable independent asset on Earth. The seller would receive the largest completed payment in history. The entire world would watch me pay. I never mentioned Grant. That was why he had to enter. His entire life depended on being the most important person in the room. If another owner took the crown price, Grant's last identity disappeared. Helios would no longer be the thing I could not buy. It would be the thing I had not considered worth bidding on. At 4:20, Grant announced that Helios Crown would enter the auction. The coalition erupted. People who had spent all day calling him the final defender now called him a traitor. Julian said nothing. He had known Grant would break eventually. He had probably included that weakness in his plan. Grant did not care. He saw only the stage. The auction took place at sunset on the floating city beneath the Helios ring. Owners offered islands, companies, resource networks, entire districts, and space infrastructure. I bid slowly. Grant watched each price climb, terrified that someone else would become the seller who forced the greatest payment. When Helios Crown appeared, the opening value was $2.2 trillion. I bid $2.3 trillion. Another industrial group offered a larger collection of assets at $2.35 trillion. Grant's face changed. He added factories, energy reserves, private transport fleets, and his remaining tower holdings to the Helios package. The fair value reached $2.48 trillion. I remained silent. The auctioneer asked whether I would bid. The world waited. Grant leaned toward the camera. You came here for the crown, he said. I looked at him while my balance climbed by 100 million every second. No, I said. You did. He understood too late. I bid $2,480 billion. No other collection exceeded it. Grant raised both arms as if he had won. Fireworks launched from the floating city. The gold crown on his head reflected the orbital mirrors. I walked onto the stage in my stained uniform. For the cameras, I lowered one knee. Grant smiled so widely that he looked ill. Then I completed the purchase. Every Helios screen changed to my symbol. The floating city's throne rotated away from Grant and toward me. The orbital mirrors turned. A beam of harmless gold light descended around the stage like a pillar. I stood. Grant was still smiling when the security floor moved beneath him and carried him gently away from the throne. I took the gold crown from his head. It was part of the Helios ceremonial collection. I had purchased that too. The coalition had called Grant its final independent king. Now he had trillions of dollars and no kingdom, no allies, no stage, and no crown. I leaned close enough that only he could hear me. You spent your whole life becoming a number I replaced before dinner. Then I placed the crown on the golden lion. The crowd laughed. Grant had finally received everything he believed money guaranteed. Cash without power. Attention without respect. Victory without winning. But Julian had not built Black Midnight around Grant. Grant was only the loudest lock. At 7 in the evening after the Helios purchase and every construction order, my remaining challenge balance was still $1,600 billion. 5 hours remained. Most large sellers were gone. The coalition had closed every major market that had not already broken. Julian appeared on the floating city's highest platform as the sun vanished behind the ocean. You knew Grant would sell, I said. Yes. You wanted me to buy Helios. Yes. You used him to absorb time, not money. Yes. The brass coin moved across his fingers. That is the difference between us, Julian said. You see the largest number and think it is the greatest obstacle. I see the last 5 hours. Below us, the world map dimmed again. $1,600 billion. The balance increased by 6 billion every minute. Julian looked toward the horizon. There is nothing left. I thought of Serena's words. Stop looking at the crown. I smiled. There are 8 billion things left. At 7:01, Serena activated the second operation. Every shopping center I owned changed at once. The music stopped. Advertising screens went black. Storefront lights turned white. A single message appeared in thousands of cities, translated into every language the network could carry. Adrian is buying. Not companies, not crowns. Everything real. For the next 5 hours, any person or independent business could offer genuine goods, inventory, production, or useful service at normal value. The system would not accept fake prices, neither would I. A loaf of bread was worth the price of bread. A truck was worth the price of a truck. A year of factory output was worth what the output could truly produce. But the scale belonged to everyone. A farmer offered the next harvest. A mechanic offered a fleet of repaired engines. A small hotel offered every empty room for the month. A theater offered its unsold seats. A fishing town offered its morning catch before the boats returned. Artists offered paintings. Builders offered tools. Restaurants offered meals. Drivers offered rides. Data centers offered unused storage. Power companies outside the coalition offered electricity. Independent factories offered machines, glass, batteries, pipes, medical equipment, and construction parts. The first minute produced $9 billion in purchases. The second produced 12. Then the world understood. Black Midnight had asked ordinary people to protect billionaires from me. I was asking ordinary people what they wanted to sell. The answer was everything they had spent their lives trying to make valuable. Store owners rolled entire inventories into the center of shopping malls. Barcodes flashed beneath scanning drones. Farmers drove lines of machines beneath temporary arches. Fishing fleets entered ports with my symbol projected over the water. Artists filled streets with canvases. Independent car lots emptied. Construction yards lit up. Stadiums sold future events. Hotels sold millions of empty nights that I redirected to families and workers. Every purchase became mine. Then I decided where it went. Food moved to free distribution centers. Building materials moved to the cities ordered that morning. Hotel rooms went to travelers, patients, and people without homes. Machines went to factories expanding public production. Art went to schools, stations, hospitals, and museums. Transportation capacity joined the free network. I did not give sellers imaginary fortunes for worthless objects. I purchased value that already existed and moved it where I wanted. That was not a loophole. It was an economy obeying a new center of gravity. At 7:30, the purchase rate reached $20 billion per minute. At 8, 40 billion. The world map no longer displayed a few large lights. It burned with millions of tiny ones. Julian's coalition had closed 1,000 fists. I opened 1 billion hands. Grant tried to stop the wave. He appeared on a private channel and told people that selling to me meant surrendering their freedom. The response was immediate. Every screen beside his face displayed the payment he had accepted for Helios Crown. $2,480 billion. Then a smaller counter appeared beneath it. Time Adrian needs to earn that amount. 6 hours, 53 minutes, 20 seconds. Grant had sold more than anyone else on Earth, and then demanded that shop owners reject me for principle. Nobody listened. Several channels cut away before he finished speaking. Money had once guaranteed his audience. Now the audience belonged to the person spending faster. At 8:30, my challenge balance had fallen below $1 trillion. Another $1,260 billion would still arrive before midnight. Serena coordinated the global market from Northline. She did not look tired anymore. For the first time, the spending was not a parade of private islands and golden furniture. Every purchase fed a project with a visible use. She pointed toward the map. Independent medical suppliers are offering 3 years of output. Buy it. Regional rail builders are offering 6,000 trains. Buy them. Thousands of small farms want guaranteed purchases. Buy every harvest they can deliver. Musicians are offering performances. Put them in the stations. Someone is selling a 40-foot statue of you made from spoons. I looked at the image. It was terrible. Buy it. Serena laughed despite herself. We placed the spoon statue beside the golden lion. Ridiculous things deserved company. At 9, Julian made his final public appeal. He did not defend Grant. He did not mention the coalition. He spoke directly to the people selling. Adrian does not need your permission after he owns what you need, he said. A good decision today does not guarantee a good decision tomorrow. Sales slowed. The message was effective because it was true. I could have flooded the channels with attacks. I could have displayed Julian beside Grant and called them partners. I could have used my networks to silence him completely. I did none of those things. I carried his speech on every screen I owned. Serena looked at me. Why? Because people should hear the strongest argument against me. That sounds almost humble. It is strategic. Weak criticism makes power look afraid. Strong criticism makes victory look earned. She shook her head. There I was again. Even honesty became a weapon once I touched it. Julian's speech reduced participation for 11 minutes. Then a worker at one of my free hospitals appeared on a live feed. The worker said the hospital had received new machines that morning, treated thousands for free, and hired more staff. A farmer showed the payment for crops that had previously rotted without buyers. A family entered an apartment built by the Eclipse factories. A small manufacturer displayed an order large enough to keep every employee working for years. No single testimony defeated Julian's warning. Millions did. Sales accelerated again. At 10, the balance stood at $620 billion. 2 hours of future income meant another $720 billion was coming. We still needed to purchase $1,340 billion before midnight. The easy inventory was gone. Store shelves had emptied. Vehicle lots were bare. Hotels had sold their available rooms. Factories had committed output. Farms had offered harvests. Independent power networks had sold capacity. The world had sold more in 3 hours than anyone thought it could produce. Julian entered Northline at 10:15. No security stopped him. I had instructed them not to. He walked through the command floor as millions of transactions flashed around him. His brass coin moved slowly between his fingers. You found a larger market, he said. I found the actual market. You are still short. For now, participation is flattening. At the current rate, you miss by 300 billion. Your estimate assumes people are finished. Most people have nothing else ready to sell. I looked at Serena. She changed the screens. A new category appeared. Time. Julian's eyes narrowed. I knew what he thought. A fake purchase, a technical escape, paying people for nothing and calling it value. He was wrong. I did not buy random seconds from strangers. I bought completed work the world already needed. Millions of builders, drivers, nurses, teachers, cooks, engineers, cleaners, programmers, performers, repair workers, translators, designers, and emergency crews offered real service through projects active inside my network. Every task had a normal market value. Every hour produced something. Schools gained instructors, hospitals gained shifts, construction sites gained crews, transit gained drivers, public kitchens gained cooks, data systems gained maintenance, cities gained art, music, cleaning, repair, and care. I purchased a year of useful work from anyone who chose to offer it, paid at full local value, and directed toward the projects I had already bought. The response crashed 3 of my data centers. I purchased replacement capacity from independent providers before the 4th could fail. At 10:30, the market moved $80 billion in 1 minute. At 10:40, $100 billion, the map became so bright that individual transactions disappeared into white continents. Julian watched the balance estimate fall. "This makes them dependent on you," he said. "It makes me dependent on them too." "No, you can replace workers." "Not all of them." He looked at me. For once I was not speaking for the cameras. The system had given me enough money to treat humanity like a collection of assets. Serena's plan forced me to see the opposite. Trillions of dollars could not build a hospital without people inside it. It could not move a train without someone deciding where it should go. It could not make art, care, trust, or memory by itself. Money was power because people agreed to act around it. Julian had been right about consent. He had only been wrong about whose consent I needed. At 11, the balance was $280 billion. 1 hour of future income meant $360 billion more. We still needed $640 billion in completed purchases. Serena's market continued, but its rate began falling. Most available work had been matched. Most inventory had been claimed. Every minute now added more money than the market removed. At 11:10, the projected miss returned. $120 billion. At 11:15, 140. At 11:20, Julian's prediction screen showed 170 billion left at midnight. Grant reappeared on a small independent broadcast, no longer wearing the crown. He smiled. Even after selling everything that made him important, he still believed my failure would restore him. I almost admired the purity of his delusion. Serena approached me at the center of the command floor. "We need another concentrated purchase. Available? Nothing large enough. Then divide it." "We already divided the world, not orbit." I turned toward Daylight 1. The orbital station had spent the day coordinating thousands of new satellites, cargo shuttles, construction machines, fuel depots, and rescue vehicles. Many were built by independent manufacturers that had broken Black Midnight. The largest units were not yet mine. They were being delivered one at a time after final testing. Each orbital tug cost exactly $100 million at genuine manufacturing value. 100 million was also the amount my system produced every second. I ordered every completed tug moved into a delivery line around Daylight 1. Thousands of white machines formed a spiral visible through orbital cameras. Julian saw the plan. "You do not have enough completed units," he said. "Not yet." Factories on Earth increased production. Workers who had sold their time entered shifts. Machines printed components. Cargo rockets carried engines upward. Every new tug created 1 second of spending. At 11:30, the projected miss fell to 90 billion. At 11:40, 42 billion. At 11:50, 9 billion. Then a factory stopped. A critical engine plant joined Julian's coalition at the final moment. Production froze. The orbital delivery line ended 800 units too early. The projected miss rose instantly. $80 billion. 10 minutes remained. Julian closed his hand around the coin. He had not arranged the factory shutdown. I could tell from his expression. But Black Midnight had gained one final believer at the exact moment it mattered. Serena searched the map. No replacement can produce that many engines in 10 minutes. Then do not produce engines. What else costs exactly 100 million? I looked across the categories we had purchased during the day. Aircraft, buildings, art, energy, medical equipment, ships, data, construction, food, vehicles. Thousands of products approached the number, but few were standardized enough to clear one per second. Then I saw the Harbor Palace. The temporary city of cargo containers I had built during the $10,000 cycle still stood beside the port. It had expanded into a permanent district. Independent engineering groups had developed modular ocean platforms there, each carrying power, housing, water treatment, and gardens. Every module was valued at $200 million. $200 million. At the current system rate, that was 2 seconds of income. There were more than enough completed modules waiting for buyers. I ordered the port to begin delivery. At 11:51, one module sold. 200 million vanished. 2 seconds later, another. The balance began falling again. Julian watched the projected miss shrink. Grant's broadcast disappeared. At 11:55, we were on pace to reach zero with 6 seconds to spare. Then a storm hit the harbor. A wind slammed into the modular platforms. Waves lifted the delivery bridges. Automatic systems stopped transfers for safety. The purchase line froze. 4 minutes remained. The storm was real. No sabotage, no enemy, no clever person to manipulate. Just weather arriving at the worst possible moment. I laughed. Serena stared at me. What is funny? Julian spent all day proving I need consent. The ocean is not given it. I purchased every available heavy-lift helicopter and storm-rated cargo aircraft outside the coalition. They launched from airfields across the coast. I purchased floating cranes, emergency tow ships, stabilization drones, and mobile breakwaters. They entered the harbor beneath sheets of rain. Aircraft cables dropped through the storm and attached to the modules. Tugboats pulled from below. Drones locked around the edges. One by one, the ocean platforms rose clear of the waves. The first completed delivery at 11:57. Then another. Then another. $200 million vanished every 2 seconds. The challenge balance fell through 30 billion. 20. 10. At 11:59, the remaining balance was $6 billion. 60 seconds remained. The next 60 seconds would create another 6 billion. I needed to spend 12 billion before midnight. A completed orbital ferry waited beside Daylight 1. Its fair value was $6 billion. I purchased it. 0. 100 million appeared. The first orbital tug delivered. 0. Another second. Another 100 million. Another tug. 0. The entire world watched the final sequence. Each second, the system paid me $100 million. Each second, a white orbital tug changed ownership and joined Daylight 1. 50 seconds, 40, 30, the station became surrounded by a growing ring of machines. On Earth, the lifted ocean platforms formed a second ring above the storm. In the city, every screen displayed the same number. 0. Again. 0. Again. Julian stood beside me, counting without speaking. Serena controlled the delivery line. Grant watched from somewhere no camera cared to show. 10 seconds remained. 10 tugs. 9. 8. At 4 seconds, one orbital tug reported a guidance error and drifted out of line. Serena's hand froze above the controls. The next purchase could not complete. 3 seconds, 100 million entered the balance. I looked at Julian's brass coin. It rested between his fingers. A crown on one side, 0 on the other. I took it from him. He did not resist. 2 seconds. The balance reached 200 million. The drifting tug corrected its course as the next tug moved beside it. Serena completed both purchases together. 0. 1 second. 100 million appeared. The final tug connected to Daylight 1. Payment cleared. 0. Midnight struck. For one silent instant, every screen on Earth displayed nothing but the number. Then the system changed. Challenge complete. New rate, $1 billion per second. $1 billion appeared. The world erupted. Fireworks launched from shopping centers, ports, cities, ships, and orbital platforms. Daylight 1 rotated its solar wings and cast a golden band across the night. The ocean modules descended through the storm and connected into a new floating district. Trains sounded their horns. Hospital lights flashed. Millions of sellers saw completed payments. Billions of people watched the empire of Black Midnight open its doors again. Grant's coalition collapsed before 1 minute passed. Its members had refused me all day, then watched Grant sell the largest asset on Earth. They abandoned him. His new trillions could buy luxury, but not restore the position he had traded away. For the first time in his life, he possessed money without anyone mistaking it for greatness. That was the punishment I wanted. Not poverty. Understanding. Julian looked at the brass coin in my hand. "You won," he said. "I reached 0. That is not the same thing." "No," I agreed. "It is better." He looked around Northline at the world map, now brighter than it had been before Black Midnight. "You purchased enough dependence to call it cooperation, and you organized enough fear to call it freedom." Neither of us smiled. The game between us had not ended. It had changed. Julian had proved that money alone could be resisted. Serena had proved that power became larger when people chose to participate. Grant had proved that a man could sell his entire identity if the stage was bright enough. And I had proved that the world was more expensive than its billionaires believed. Serena walked to the window. The first light of morning touched Northline's crown. "What happens to everything you bought?" she asked. "The hospitals stay free for basic care. The food network stays active. The new cities continue. The orbital power goes public. The work people sold gets completed." She looked at me, surprised. "You plan that?" "I plan everything." "That is not true." I glanced at the storm clearing over the harbor. "Almost everything." She smiled slightly. It was not forgiveness. It was not approval. It was enough to keep her beside me. My new rate continued. $1 billion every second, 60 billion every minute, 3,600,000,000,000 every hour. The next full day would produce $86,400,000,000,000. Earth had barely absorbed 1/10 of that during the greatest selling event in history. I stood at the window wearing the old stained uniform, holding Julian's coin, while the golden crown rested on the ugly lion behind me. The boy Grant had mocked was gone. The memory was not. I would keep it forever, not as a wound, but as a measurement of distance. My phone vibrated, not with a system message, with a live transmission from space. Every screen in Northline turned toward the moon. On its far side, beyond the reach of ordinary telescopes, a chain of lights ignited across a crater. Towers rose from the darkness. A private lunar city, built in secret by owners who had refused Black Midnight and Helios alike, announced its existence to the world. The transmission contained one sentence: "The moon is not for sale." Serena looked at me. Julian looked at the moon. I looked at my balance. It had crossed $120 billion during the short broadcast. Then I turned Julian's coin over in my fingers and placed 0 face upward on the glass. For the first time since the system awakened, I saw something that might be expensive enough to last until breakfast. I smiled.